There we go. Here we are. And lost my audience. Let's see. Where's the share freaking button? Don't see one. Oh, I got one. Oswald is on. Well, I will post this link and get the hourglass of doom again. All right. I wonder if the others will be back, like Sleepy Dave and Philip and I forget who. Anyway, we're going to talk about valis. I'm just going to check on my sandwich, my pulled pork sandwich with barbecue sauce one more time. All right, and okay. Hi, sweetie kitty cat. I guess my little feral kitty smelled the pulled pork. She came running in. Did you need? You can't have my pulled pork, but you can have some kitty treats. Here, kid. I used to call her mommy, but she wouldn't forgive me for selling her babies. Hi, Philip. So now I call her sweetie, kind of because that's what Doctor Who's wife called him. I liked her better than the doctor. Now I can't remember her name. Anyway, okay, I will use the sweet baby rays this time, but our local Ace Hardware garden shop sells an organic non-GMO barbecue sauce, so I'll look into that. It's rather pricey. Anyway, we want to talk about valis. It's acceptably warm, not hot. What, sweetie, you want more? More gruel? Well, I'll give you a little bite of my pulled pork. Just, where are you? Kitty. Sweetie. Oh, there you are. Here. I think her tomcat boyfriend has been pestering her again. Now, Sweetie has been spayed. I don't call it fixed because she wasn't broken. Now my cats email my friend's cats. And of course, we do the typing. And the cats always want to know why they got stitches. So when the cat has been spayed, we say she got her stitches. Oh, chocolate is melting. Bummer. Anyway, valis. Okay. Chocolate. Valis is mind-blowing and should not be the first Philip K. Dick novel that you read. He repeats over and over the information that he found in research when his pink light experience led him to look into all kinds of woo-woo stuff in 1974. And he rephrases it in different ways, sometimes, well, mostly through the character of horse lover Fats, who, of course, is an alter ego of Phil. And Philip K. Dick is also a character in the novel. From time to time, he realizes that he, Phil, and Fats are the same person, but that realization doesn't seem to stick for very long. Yes, I'm a recovering English teacher. You got me. I say chocolate and caramel. I don't say Wednesday, but I don't call it Wednesday either. What do we are our days of the week called? Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Fourthday, Fivesday, 6D, and 7D? I don't think so. It's Wednesday, and you kind of swallow the D. It's almost there. Kind of pretend you're Welsh. You pronounce every fourth or fifth letter in a word. I don't know why they spell the words the way they do, because they certainly are not phonetic. Wotan's Day, yes. Or Woden. Let me type that. Same guy, different language. Yeah, it is Votan or Vodon. Yeah, it's Votan and Voden. Uh, Wagner called it him Votan. Wagner was German. Uh, okay, I'll type that. Same guy, different language. And my dyslexia is showing Language. Anyway, sorry that I hope I didn't mess up my black corduroy slacks too bad. In Valis, we have Phil shacking up with Doris. We have um, Nick Brady from Radio Free Albemuth, which was written earlier. And Nick Brady seems to be a bad guy in the movie Valis, which the characters in the novel Valis go to see. Now, the movie Valis is supposed to be based on the David Bowie movie, or is it Bowie? The Man Who Fell to Earth. But the actor he describes, along with his wife, seems to me to be more like Adam Ant and his first wife, Carol something. She would have her hair extremely short, like the actress in Valis. Now, I have not gotten to the part where Phil actually meets the Hamptons who play the major roles in the movie Valis. I've gotten about halfway through. Reading the novel was making me too crazy, so I've been listening to it a 9.5 hour audio book. It reminds me of things like I had actually a little bit of study of Plato's Greek. So it is ancient Greek and probably Koine, the common Greek of biblical times and earlier, or later, I mean. Seeing as how the Bible covers, the beginning, Genesis, through the first century. Anyway, I really could not understand that much Greek. I just recognized the first time Phil said Sadasa, he didn't say Sadasa, he said Thalassa, which is the sea, SEA, like the ocean. And then he said ulna, not Sylvia, but ulna, which is a Latin word for your elbow. So I thought, well, maybe he was talking about an arm of the sea, but why two different languages? Mm. But he came up with other words and phrases, many of which were in English, like you have to put your slippers on to walk toward the dawn, which he um, related to, I think, Asclepios, either Empedocles or Asclepios. I'm pretty sure it was Asclepios. They were both doctors in ancient times. The gods didn't like the way they managed to heal people that the gods wanted dead. Anyway, Asclepius one day just put on his golden sandals and walked to the mouth of a volcano and jumped in. At least that's what they say. And Phil thought that that little rhyming phrase, you have to put your slippers on to walk toward the dawn, was about Asclepios. Uh, I'm not sure whether the audiobook is robot or human, but I would guess human. I gotta have more of my pulled pork. Mmm. Mmm. Messy. Mmm. Good though. I'm going to try in a while, my other way of reheating barbecue. You heat the barbecue sauce and then pour it on. Anyway, let's see. I don't prefer audiobooks. I could probably read the novel in a couple hours instead of 9.5. But Valis just is not only mind blowing, but for me, very emotional. Um, Phil said that his agent and editor wanted him to call Beth something much worse than bitch, and Phil said, absolutely not. Not calling the mother of my child that word. I'll leave it to your imagination. But anyway, in the novel, Beth keeps pestering him for the child support, which is a huge amount of money that Fats has to pay to his ex wife. Well, I got news for you. My attorney was asking 400. Phil called me on the phone and said he couldn't afford it, so I let him off the hook at 200 a month. Now, the last year or so of his life, he paid me 400, but I didn't have a legal order for the 400, just his word on it, because I didn't know he was going to drop dead. And there were suspicious circumstances surrounding the way he died. His neighbors next door said that a person named Mary had sold Phil cocaine, and they didn't think he took it. They thought it was still in the apartment and they wished they could go get it out of there. Now, this is hearsay. It's what his neighbors said. But they also told that to Doris Sauter and her friend Gwen Geip Lee. Gwen was a pretty good friend to Phil, and actually Doris was too. She was not the monster portrayed in Valis, although she did some things you could call mean or stupid. She wasn't at heart an evil person, just young, about my age, maybe 1 or 2 years older, and the foolishness of youth. Anyway, Gwen interviewed Phil and published a little book, and I wish I could remember the title, but Doris is on it as co author, and it's on Amazon. And something about the last interview in which Phil talked about a possible plot for the Owl in Daylight. Of course, he gave his editor and his agent a completely different plot idea. And even though they tell me that the movie Tron did not come out till after Phil died, I am positive that he saw previews, trailers, ads for it on television before in the movie theaters. The coming soon, and they show a few clips. I'm sure that he knew something about that movie Tron because his plot was an awful lot like Tron. A scientist caught in his own computer program. Of course, Phil's scientist would not have been driving a little car and getting shot at, but he would go through many trials and tribulations. Anyway, Valis has an imaginary movie, probably based on the man who fell to earth. That's what Phil said. But mostly it has all these snippets from philosophy and religion, especially the early church fathers, and mythology. Now, I agree with Phil that mythology is true history. Well, hello, Tim. Tim Greenglass is here. Yay! We have 3 listeners and 2 thumbs up. Anyway, let's get the document. Phil talks about hypostasis. In the audiobook, they drive me nuts. They say hypostasis, which makes me think it's a human. Hypostasis, I don't think Phil understood what it really means, but he used it a lot to indicate that something became an actual object in our universe, although it was properly just an idea or a spirit or something intangible. Intangible. Mm. More coffee, more cigarettes. But what I'm looking into now is a book that I think I will write, even though it does require me to use footnotes. I've left the hallowed halls of academia after slaving for 12 years teaching English, communications, and film classes, and sometimes even sociology. The first 10 years were wonderful, even though the pay is like uh, really poor because they call you adjunct faculty and you're officially part time temporary, so you don't get benefits. and you get paid depending upon how many students sign up for your class, not by how many hours you work. And for every hour worked in the classroom, you can count on 2 or 3 hours at home or in the office. And even so, my pay was working out to $35 an hour for 10 years. And then suddenly Chapman University became a university. It was a college. It got down to where I was earning enough money to keep the car to drive to work. So I left academia, but I know how to do footnotes. And if Walter Bosley can do them, I can do them. I have a master's degree in using footnotes. They call it English literature. Anyway, my working title is the X in exegesis, the letter X. I'll go look at YouTube again. Yes, valis, vast active living in, well, Phil called it intelligence with a CE on the end. I think he thought it was spying on us, gathering intelligence, but spying in a good way. Yeah, Oswald, the adjunct positions are people fight over them, and I'm not gonna. Hey, I gave up the car. Problem solved. Don't have to work for enough money to keep a car. Yeah, I would consider being an author in residence if someone asked me. That's a cool position. You don't actually have to live at the college, they just call you that and give you a stipend. And once in a while, you show up and give a speech or answer questions, and you get to sell your books to the students. Okay, did PKD pray often or attend church much? He prayed a lot. He wasn't a churchgoer. He would go to the church building to talk to the priest, but not during services. He was an Episcopalian, but after he divorced Anne and married Nancy, they told him he couldn't take communion unless he confessed that his marriage to Nancy was a sin because the church had not granted him a divorce from Anne. And Phil said he was not going to insult his wife by calling their marriage a sin. So he quit going to communion and then quit going to church, but he still hung out with Bishop Pike. And Pike really was a heretic, but he was also a canon law lawyer. That's a religious thing. And he didn't get excommunicated, but he had to give up his office and position as Bishop of California. They kind of settled it out of court. And that would not have been our civil court anyway, it would have been a religious court. So, anyway, Pike went to mediums trying to contact the spirit of his dead son, Jim Jr. Yes, he was into spiritualism. Phil and Nancy went to two of the seances, and at one of them, Phil said, well, the medium contacted something, but it wasn't Jim Jr., and Phil didn't think it was even human. So he had a healthy respect for and fear of trance medium activities. Anyway, Pike was killed in the desert, accompanied by his second wife, Diane Kennedy. And I don't know all the facts, but Phil knew Pike personally and suspected that um, Diane Kennedy had killed him herself. On the other hand, Diane almost died in the desert herself. Oh, yeah, the transmigration of Timothy Archer has a lot about Bishop Pike because that's who Timothy Archer is, really. Anyway, Phil personally knew Pike and his previous secretary. Diane Kennedy started out as Pike's secretary. Well, Phil's previous secretary was Marin Bergman, Phil's wife Nancy's stepmother. So he knew her personally. They officially, Marin killed herself because of her unrequited love for Bishop Pike. And Phil said it was anything but unrequited. And when Pike dumped her, that was just the last straw in a series of things that made Marin Bergman crazy enough to kill herself. Poor Nancy, she's a wonderful, sweet lady. But her family treated her very badly. And since I don't have personal knowledge of it, I'll leave it at that. Anyway, in Valis, let's see. Why the X in exegesis? Well, Phil was fond of pointing out that the cross on which Jesus was crucified was not shaped like the letter T. It's incredibly difficult to get a single post to stand up with all that weight on it and to get the crossbar to stay put without spinning around. But if the cross were shaped like an X, which was common in Roman times, that would make much more sense. You could just set it down and put a beam behind it to lean the X on, and it would stay put. In addition, when the Roman Emperor Constantine won an important battle at a bridge, and for the life of me, I can't remember what the bridge was called, and it doesn't seem to be in my notes. No, it isn't. Of course it is. Signo Vinces, which the audiobook also massacres. In this sign you will conquer, was supposedly Constantine's motto, and the sign or signal or symbol, they tell you it was the cross. Well, it wasn't. It was the true Christian symbol of the time. Chi Rho. Let's see, I better put that in the Chi Rho. The two Greek letters that begin the word Christ, the CH and the R. The Jehovah Witnesses, well, that figures. Some say that he was hanged on a tree, and it isn't hung. You hung up your clothes in the closet. You hanged the criminal. So there. I'm only a slightly recovered English teacher, still recovering. Yeah, I wasn't there either, but most crucifixions took place on crosses formed in the shape of the letter X. And the symbol of Constantine on his banner led his troops to victory was the Chi-Rho symbol. Let's see if I can copy it off my document and paste it into the chat room and see if you can see it. Yeah, you can kind of see it. The two letters are together. They have the X and then the vertical part of the R, which looks like the letter P. X and P. X is chi and P is actually rho, R. The vertical part comes down through the center of the cross, and the loop on the top of the P sits on top of the X. That was Constantine's banner, rho, X, P. Chiromancy exists. Yeah, I've heard the word too. Oh, Lord. Let's see what else is in. For some reason, I have a note that says Porcupine Tree, a music band, but I don't know what it's in reference to. Also, the hooked X. It's sort of an X with a little loop on one of the bottom legs. Is a symbol of the Knights Templar. Oh, and X is also the Roman numeral 10. The Kensington runestone in, I forget where Kensington is, in the Midwest, uh, has a hooked X. Henry Sinclair of the that chapel in Scotland, Roslin Chapel, his signature he used a hooked X. And so did Columbus. It wasn't that Columbus was illiterate, far from it, but he used a hooked X in his signature. Now let's see. One of the biggest themes of Valis is the twins, twin deities and twin universes. Oh, chiromancy is palm reading. Thank you, Oswald. That deserves a purr. I speak cat, although the cats would beg to differ. They can't understand a word I meow. Twins are everywhere. Well, Phil was a twin, and his twin sister died at about 6 weeks old. Her name would have been Jane. It was Jane. Middle initial C, and I've forgotten what the C stood for. All right, in Valis, over and over, you see the twins. Well, I've kind of simplified what Phil said about twins in Valis and in the exegesis. Basically, God contained all pairs of opposites. He contained everything. So, in a sense, God did not exist because the opposites canceled each other, leaving nothing that could be observed. In fact, no observer existed to attempt to see God. So, in the sense that God could not be observed, God was no thing or nothing and did not exist, at least not in a way that we can understand. Let me type that. I didn't put that in. At least not in a way that we could understand. Where is it? Okay. Now, this also isn't in there, but this is very similar to the Greek idea. Well, we have it from the Roman author Tacitus. Clinamen. Hope I'm right that it's Tacitus. He was defending an early Greek atomist theory. Could have been Lucretius, but I think it was Tacitus. I don't dare try to do a Google search or any search, or I'll probably crash the live stream again. Anyway, Klineman is the idea of a tiny piece of chaos in an otherwise perfectly orderly universe. Now, the atomists, the very early ancient Greek, oh, thank you, Philip. Kensington is in Minnesota. The poor farmer who found the Kensington runestone probably wished he never had found it. He suffered greatly because of it. Accused of a hoax and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, these early Greek atomists concluded that all matter in the universe was made of atoms. Tiny, tiny particles that could not be divided into anything smaller. Scientists insist that they didn't know about atoms the way we know about atoms, but I'll let that go for now. The thing is that in the beginning, all the atoms in the universe were falling in a stream of perfectly orderly symmetry. So even though everything existed, there really was nothing. It would be like seeing a whole universe that's completely white or completely black with nothing you can distinguish. Kind of like when you turn off your TV, it's a blank screen, there's nothing on it, even though technically there is something on it. And then this tiny bit of chaos, a force so small you can't even measure it, which they called Klineman, caused one single atom to go off course. And that was how our universe began, not in cosmos, which is order, but in chaos, which is disorder. Because without disorder, there isn't anything. There is nothing. There is no thing. It's just a blank screen. So, anyway, back to my notes. So, God could exist and have and be everything and yet be nothing. So, was Phil a Thomistic monist, a Cartesian dualist, or something else? Well, he didn't really like Descartes' dualism. But I don't think he liked monism either. I think you can tell by the way he struggles to describe it, and people struggle to understand what he's saying. that Phil thought that our universe was much more than any theory had yet posited. He was fascinated by the ideas of the nuclear physicists and especially quarks, quarks which exist only in mathematical equations. You cannot do any sort of scientific test for them, but they do seem to exist. And the electrons and neutrons and protons are made of quarks. I'm not sure whether he ever delved into theory, but that's even more purely mathematical. We can actually smash atoms enough to actually get traces, not the quarks themselves, but the traces of quarks. The photographic plate will see the path that the quark traveled. Yes, Tim, the quarks have been demonstrated in atom smashers. They don't actually see the quarks, but they see the evidence that a quark was there. I'm thinking of CERN, but I'm sure that other cyclotrons or whatever have also found traces of quarks, but nobody has found a trace of a string. It's at least at this stage in our technology, strings are purely mathematical constructs that happen to work when when physicists are trying to explain things. I'm talking too fast, I'll betcha. Anyway, let's see. So God could both exist and not exist at the same time. And Phil would compare this to the yin yang symbol of Taoism. So even though um, horse lover Fats in Valis claims he knows nothing about Taoism, Phil had read the Tao Te Ching. It's spelled Tao, but it's Tao. The path. Phil knew a lot about it. Tried to pass himself off as a Zen master at sometimes, just for fun. Okay, the yin yang symbol of Taoism, it looks like a white polywog and a black polywog, but the white polywog has a black dot, kind of like an eye, and the black polywog has a white dot, kind of like an eyeball, but just a dot, no pupil, no iris. So in Taoism, in the yin yang symbol, each part contains a small amount of the other part. And so when God divided itself, since it was both male and female, or neither male nor female, it was it, God divided itself into two parts. One contained the active aspects of the deity, and the other contained the passive aspects. But the active half contained a small portion of the passive, that little dot, and the passive half contained a small part of the active, that white dot in the black half. And this was done so each half of God would remember the other half, since each had a small portion of the other as a reminder. And remember, this is my way of expressing what Phil was thinking. So God becomes twins, like in Zoroastrianism. Since each twin contains the opposite of the other twin, and since God is everything, One twin contains existence while the other contains non existence. In other words, the active twin exists and contains a small amount of non existence, while the passive twin does not exist and contains a small amount of existence. So when in Valis, Fats and Phil and others are discussing the twins, and I think it's when Fats is talking to his psychologist. Anyway, Fats says the second twin, the passive one, does not exist. That's literally true, and yet um, the active one is male, the passive one is female or masculine and feminine. She doesn't exist, but she does exist. And of course, this is the problem that Phil dealt with ever since he learned that his twin sister died. She doesn't exist because she's dead, but she does exist. She's buried in Fort Morgan, Colorado. And to Phil's mind and mine, she's in the afterlife, so she does exist. Kind of like Kevin's cat in Valis. Every time they bring up religion, Kevin hauls out his dead cat and says, "How does God explain this?" Well, I'm not here to argue theology at the moment. What is a good man but a bad man's teacher? What is a bad man but a good man's job? Oh, Tim is being Zen like. Um, yes, some matters does seem to pop in and out of existence. Of course, that was a theory that modern physicists have rejected, that um, used to be that matter would spontaneously emerge from the vacuum of space, but it would emerge in pairs, one piece of matter and one piece of antimatter. And in most cases, they would be attracted to each other, and when they touched, they would mutually annihilate, creating tons of energy because that's what they were made from in the first place. It does seem to happen sometimes. And in the old theory, just enough matter never met the antimatter, and so that's how our universe came to be. That there's all this antimatter out there somewhere, but it isn't touching matter, so there's no mutual annihilation. I don't know. We can't see the actual Big Bang, but I'm tired of hearing people ask, well, if the Big Bang, you know, created everything, where'd all that stuff come from? Because they have this idea, and apparently the astrophysicists encourage it, that this point from which the Big Bang emerged was nothing. Well, it was nothing in the sense that we could not observe it. Still can't observe it. There's reasons for that. They make sense, but they're complicated. Basically, we can see so many billion or light years away with current technology, and the Big Bang is just a little farther away than that. But I have a feeling we'll never be able to see it. The problem is that point, that, and a point, by the way, has no dimension at all. Uh, it technically doesn't exist, but it wasn't nothing. It was simply everything. But we couldn't observe it, so we can properly call it nothing. Like your blank TV screen, there's nothing on it, but everything is on it. All you have to do is plug it in, and your screen lights up. Same with the Big Bang. Everything was contained in a point so small it didn't exist, at least not for us, because we can't see it. Now, that'll blow your mind. With simulation theory, Tim Greenglass says, the Big Bang is just a computer program opening up. I can hang with that. Which explains spooky action at a distance because there may be no distance at all, really. Well, when you get down to it, matter doesn't really exist. Not solid matter, anyway. We're made of empty space with an occasional bit of energy which we interpret as matter. Now, it still hurts if you run into a brick wall, but that brick wall and you both contain more empty space than matter. In fact, if the nucleus of the hydrogen atom, our smallest atom, if that nucleus were the size of a golf ball, the electron orbiting that nucleus would be 3 miles away. We are made up of empty space. And yes, space is not empty. If space were empty, um, various things that we observe would not happen. If nothing else, what we call the vacuum contains energy. The physicists like to talk about dark energy and dark matter because they don't want to return to the old phrase, the medium. At one time, astronomers considered space a medium with some kind of substance to it, which would explain, for example, why the orbits of the planets around the sun very gradually, imperceptibly, slow down, travel closer to the sun. Now, the problem with that is if space is truly empty, moving closer to the sun should cause the planet to speed up again. I don't think that happens. Anyway, this isn't an astrophysics lecture. Yes, Oswald, the medium is the message. And of course, we have all these weird out of place artifacts. We get to see some of them once in a while, especially if you get Michael Cremo's book, Forbidden Archaeology. He had a co author, and I can't remember the guy's name. He died a few years ago, but Michael Cremo is still alive and doing the lecture circuit and interviews on, well, I get them on YouTube. Anyway, that's Cremo, Cremo. I should type that. Michael Cremo, Forbidden Archaeology. There's a shorter version of the book, which is also good for people with smaller budgets. It's paperback and shorter and cheaper. Dang, there's one fly in the house and it wants to land on my pulled pork. No. Anyway, you can see all these out of place artifacts, and many of them would make sense if the archaeologists and anthropologists would simply accept that even if Noah's flood is only a myth, by the way, myth doesn't mean false or fairy tale, but even if Noah's flood didn't cover the entire earth, there have been huge floods. The white cliffs of Dover on England's east coast are made of billions of dead sea creatures called plankton. And there are similar structures in other parts of the world that just might have happened at the same time. Uh, Something has caused major floods all over the world. And the Atlantis myth is in some sense true, but Plato did not say that the continent sank. And it isn't sunk, it's sank. I see news article after article and hear it on the radio too. The ship sunk. No, it didn't. It sank. Idiots. I will never completely recover from teaching English. Anyway, there have been major floods. So some of these formations did not take millions of years to form. And the artifacts or animal remains that they find 20 or 40 feet down are not as old as they think they are from the layers that they had to dig through to find them. Maybe there were a few dinosaurs around. Maybe that would explain Leviathan and Behemoth in the book of Job. Maybe. Maybe that would explain images of what looks for all the world like dinosaurs in ancient rock art. Maybe. Now, I'm not saying I can prove it. I am saying to laugh and scoff and ignore it is stupid. These are things that should be explored because we have these oop arts, out of place artifacts, tools made by humans in layers of rock or earth that are millions of years old. Well, are they really that old? Or was there a big old flood that laid down layer after layer in a very short period of time? Your canoe sunk because you drank too much. That was funny. Oh, Charles is here, and I was gonna scoot on out, and I'm just, I guess we've got, oh, Ozzy. Didn't think of that. Like Ozzy Osbourne. Oswald, of course, is a very infamous name. Anyway, Phil has horse lover Fats in Valis trying to explain the twin deities. And he just can't follow the orthodoxy of any religion, whether it's a heresy, a cult, or an accepted church like Catholic or Orthodox or Protestant. He just can't follow the party line. He keeps digging into all of them, including Manichaeism. Manai thought that Jesus was not God. And Orthodox, um, not just Eastern Orthodox, but all Orthodox Christianity, whether Catholic, Protestant, or whatever, they accept that Jesus was God walking among us. Manai didn't. And then there's, it's Mani, by the way. And then there's what's his name? At the Council of Nicaea, they really didn't want to boot him out of the church for heresy, but they couldn't uh, and I can't remember his name now. And as I said, I don't dare try to do an internet search for him, or my live stream will hang up on me again. Anyway, there were heresies in the early Christian church, and many of them are being revived. One more bite of pulled pork. Mm, it's it's getting cold, but it's still good. Anyway, Constantine called the councils. He did not call the shots. He told all these bishops to meet together and decide which books are in the Bible and to produce at least one copy for every church in the empire. And then he left them to do it themselves. And at the time, around 300 AD, most Christians already knew which books were canonical, which books they accepted as part of their Bible. First of all, the Old Testament was already set in stone. It was the Jewish Bible. As far as the Gospels and other parts of the New Testament go, um, they were already pretty well settled by the time all those bishops met. They did have some good arguments about First Enoch. What we call the Book of Enoch was the first of three books. Now, First Enoch has the Watchers coming down and marrying human women and producing giants, and then God punishes them for doing that. The Watchers of Enoch are the sons of God of chapter 6 in Genesis. Anyway, eventually Enoch lost. But most of the other books were pretty well accepted by everyone already. Some of the books that were not accepted hadn't been written yet. And the what we call the Gnostic Gospels, which were found at Nag Hammadi in Egypt, were works by Coptic Christians. They were written in Coptic. It's kind of the Greek alphabet used to write Egyptian words, with a lot of words borrowed from Greek. Because, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and made everybody speak Greek. Uh, Phew. And some of the early Christian fathers or great scholars were living in Alexandria. Of course, that's long after Alexander himself died. He was around 300 BC. So those existed. Many of the Gnostic texts existed at the time of the council in 300 AD, 600 years after Alexander. But they were primarily read by Egyptian Christian heretics. And they also held that Jesus was not God, but a man. But some of them, now that's just a very few, some of them considered Jesus one of the um, pleroma, the fullness of God, but a deity, but a lesser deity. And they thought Jesus was not the same as the Logos, that they were two separate entities. Whereas in John's Gospel, Jesus is the Logos. I've always said logos. I'm uncomfortable pronouncing it right. The Word of God, which is a spirit, a creature, if you will. God created all those lesser gods. Well, anyway, Gnosticism is pretty complicated, and Phil delved into it as well as he could. Some of the Nag Hammadi texts were available in English translation, even though in Valis he claims they weren't. Um, God created these, hmm, not archons. I forget what he called them, but the pleroma, the group of the heavenly creatures, the council. Yeah, Sophia is one of them. By the way, she was married to Jesus in the sky, in the heavens. Anyway, Sophia decided to engage in parthenogenesis and bear a child without her husband being involved in the conception. Now, this is Gnosticism. What she gave birth to was Yahweh, the God of the Bible. And he was, well, not exactly evil, but defective and kind of foolish and stupid. And then Yahweh's archons, who were really mean. Well, first he created humanity as slaves, and then he created the archons to rule over humanity. The archons were bad guys. Well, Sophia felt sorry for humanity and gave them a spark of the divine so that at death humans can return to the pleroma and be at one with God and the gods. It's more complicated than that, and not every Gnostic believed exactly the same thing, but most of them did believe that Jesus was a God, not a man. And they have him as a spirit taking over a human body and going through the life of Christ and then leaving while the poor human is on the cross dying. It's weird. Even weirder than Mormonism or Jehovah's Witness. I have nothing personal against the witnesses, but I am upset that their Bible has deliberate mistranslations of some verses to support um, their dogma. Mormons, well, I suppose today's Mormons, they consider themselves Christians with a Bible common. Uh, my great grandparents escaped from Utah with the Mormon police hot on their heels, but they made it to Idaho and became farmers. Long story, I won't tell the whole thing. But my grandparents decided after growing up in Idaho that they'd live a lot longer if they moved to the warmer climate of Southern California. So they did. And they lived longer. My grandfather was 88. Granny made it to 93. So if when I am in good health and expect to live a long time, I thank my ancestors who were the survivors of a very tough life. I inherited good health and I've managed to screw it up by getting in weird accidents where I get broken bones and other problems. And I suppose smoking cigarettes doesn't help. Charles, I don't know what that means. I stand overs set. Yeah, there, Tim, oh, thank you, Charles. I'm wearing my dentures today. I almost never wear them. And my hair really is a darker brown than this picture shows you. But maybe I should change my driver's license from brown to gray. Anyway, um, bird is the word, but don't tell anyone out loud. And Charles says, it's all Greek to me. Um, oh, I see. Poor Charles couldn't use CW because it's taken. You might have heard a kitty cat now and then. I have one cat left. The others made it to almost 20. The one I have left is 10 and feral. I'm not allowed to touch her, but I'm required to feed her. And when it snows, she stays in my bed and I sleep in the living room. I love my dentures. When I go to the dentist, I drop off my teeth and pick them up later. Uh, anyway, um, over sit. Sit, not set. If you over sit, that's the opposite of understand. But it's not set unless you're in England. Or maybe New England, they set a spell, maybe in the South, but it's really sit. That's what I didn't understand. I set my coffee cup down and I have a television set, but I sit in a chair because mom and English teachers made me speak proper English growing up. Tea set. Okay. I had a tea set once when I was a little kid, but I was only allowed to drink water from it. I have tea in the morning as well as coffee and water. Right now, I have some nice lemonade. Um, Maybe I'm a weirdo, but I drink lemon juice straight from the bottle of real lemon. I eat lemon wedges the way you eat orange wedges. Anyway, Gnostics are weird, and Phil puts a bit of Gnosticism into his theory of religion, but at the heart of it all, he is a Christian, or was a Christian, an Episcopalian at that, but he couldn't toe the line with church dogma, and he couldn't confess that his marriage to Nancy was a sin because that would be a great insult to his wife. And she was the mother of his child, Isa. Set. Actually, all right, in Egypt, Set is the bad guy who kills Osiris and chops him into 13 pieces. But Set is actually Seth. Um, and Seth, to a Hebrew, was the good guy who killed the false god Osiris for blasphemy. Osiris married his sister, Isis, and had a child named Horus. And they demanded that the people worship them as gods. Osiris, in particular, was the sun god. Um, Now, this is myth, but keep in mind that myth does not mean fairy tale. I'm re restudying, taking a new look at Greek and Roman mythology. They're easier for me to understand. They're closer to our time and way of thinking. Myth is history. Homer's Iliad, the Trojan War, is a history that happens to have gods in it, in particular Apollo. And a myth is a story that has at least one a divine or spiritual creature in it. A fairy tale is a story designed to frighten little children into behaving. The Odyssey, where Ulysses takes his good old time getting home from the Trojan War, takes him 20 years because the first thing he does is go up the straits and into the Black Sea, which is the opposite of the way home. Anyway, um, in the Egyptian myth, Osiris is the good guy. Um, Seth cuts him into 13 pieces, and Isis travels the world looking for his pieces. Actually, they're thrown into the Nile River. And she finds almost all of them, but a crocodile ate the most important part, the male sex organ, the penis. So Isis, who's already pregnant and can't explain it because her husband is dead, is impregnated by a sun piece and gives oh, YouTube wants to know whether I want to hide Charles's comment. I'm tired of my last name being considered a cuss word. I'm going to leave it there. Message is held for review. I'm going to show it. So there. YouTube even censors you when you say God. Anyway, uh, she gives birth to Horus, who is the reincarnated Osiris. I'm not sure about Amen and Amenhotep and Amen Ra and all that stuff. Amen Ra is usually spelled Amon, is the sun god. So when we say amen, it means so be it. Could come from Egyptian, I don't know. Anyway, in not in the Bible, but in ancient Hebrew myth, Seth is the good guy. Seth is the son born to Adam and Eve after Abel has been killed by his brother Cain, and Cain has been exiled apparently went to Egypt. How about that? But Cain worships God. He's not a heretic. He might not even have understood what death was. It was so early in the story of Adam and Eve. The real problem is, he says, am I my brother's keeper? Well, God says, yes, you are. And his blood cries up from the earth. Anyway, to the ancient Hebrews, Seth was the good guy, and Osiris deserved everything he got. Because you're not supposed to worship your, Osiris, he isn't God. Also, an interesting point is that the early worshippers of the sun actually seem to be worshiping what we might call the black sun, which is the planet Saturn. I wonder if at one time maybe Saturn shone much brighter than it does now, and maybe it was also closer to the Earth than it is now. If you look at the Greek and Roman myths, Saturn is Chronos, not time. We confused, and the Romans confused, Chronos with a K with time, which is Chronos with a CH, which is kind of like the German Ach, the sound. The Greeks would not have confused the two. Kronos is the old god, and now he rose up against his father Uranos or Uranus, which means heaven, and kicked him out, pushed him far away. Well, Kronos was uh, swallowing his children. Well, the mother of those children hid one of them, Zeus or Jupiter, had him raised up on the island of Crete, I think it was, on Earth, on an island anyway. And when Zeus grew up, he slit open his father's belly and let out his brothers and sisters, which might be a metaphor for the formation of the rings of Saturn. Um, and of course, Zeus is our planet Jupiter. So maybe Saturn was a little bigger and a little brighter and a little closer to the Earth before all this happened, as in Velikovsky's book Worlds in Collision. Velikovsky was practically laughed off the face of the planet for his theory, but it makes sense. The Aten sun disk. Well, the Aten is what Ak called the sun disk. The priests of Memphis called it Amen. So we have Tutankhamun and Amenhotep, but Akhenaten. And by the way, he named his son Tutankhaten. But after Akhenaten was exiled and Tut was put on the throne, the priests changed his name to end in Amen instead of Aten, because the priests of Memphis worshipped the sun god Amen with an M. And I really don't think that Akhenaten was a monotheist. I think he was simply breaking the power of the priests because they had too much control over the money and the people and ultimately the pharaoh. Anyway, it's wow, I've been on an hour and a half now. Paging Dr. Farrell, yes. If you even if you can't afford to subscribe to gizadeathstar.com, you can find Dr. Joseph P. Farrell all over YouTube for free. And his website, gizadeathstar.com, has a lot of free stuff up front. There's no the, it's just gizadeathstar.com. And I think his YouTube channel is Giza Death Star. As far as I know, he just does a weekly 10 or 15-minute um, report on recent news stories on YouTube. But if you can afford to subscribe to his website, I think it's $12 a month or something like that. You'll be supporting a great scholar and getting all kinds of good stuff. Oh, he streamed an hour ago and I missed it. YouTube is supposed to alert me when he comes on with his weekly what you call it. So once again, I'll have to listen on the replay and I won't be able to comment, but I'll be able to hear everything. Nope, YouTube didn't alert me. And of course, on Sunday evenings around 5:30 Pacific time in the evening, there's Walter Bosley, and he mercifully calls his channel Walter Bosley. Um, he's on. He isn't always exactly on time. He has children and dogs and responsibilities, but he's good to listen to as well. Yes, the YouTube alerts are broken. Anyway, I it's time for me to once again reheat my pulled pork. This smell of barbecue sauce is killing me. But Dr. Farrell goes into Nazis even more deeply than Phil did for The Man in the High Castle. Well, Charles, I'm more Scottish than anything else. I'm Clan Morrison. My grandmother was a Gilmore. Same clan as John Wayne. I keep forgetting what his first name was, but his real last name was Morrison. The Nazis were into a black sun thing. Yeah, supposedly the Nazi swastika stood for the planet Saturn or the black sun. Let's see. Love me some Joe. Well, around here, Joe is coffee. I love coffee. Soon to be esoteric Napoleon II channel. Wow. I'm still reading part one of Esoteric Napoleon. Ooh, Oswald plays Morrison's jig on guitar. I gotta hear that. Got a YouTube channel? Oh, so John Wayne was Marion Morrison. Okay. Almost said that, but then I thought, no, that can't be right. Oh well, it was right. Thanks, Charles. Hmm. I gotta I gotta scoot on over and listen to Dr. Farrell Oh, the Lizard King, Jim Morrison. Yeah, well, he burned his brains out, didn't he? Doing drugs. Yeah. Well, my family are a mixed lot, but very few of the Busbys, that's my dad's last name, very few of us went truly bad. Um, and the ones who did are mostly at least half Cherokee. I have a bit of Cherokee in me. You can see it in the high cheekbones. In fact, there are reservation Cherokee who look just like me. Not all Native Americans brown skin and straight black hair. Oh, and by the way, the tribes of the American Southwest will tell you they did not come from Siberia. But when they became overcrowded, some of them left and went to Siberia. But of course, the academics don't believe what the Native Americans say about their own people. No, 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 they're certain the Siberians came here when there was a land bridge across the Bering Strait to Alaska. And the natives here keep telling them, no, our people migrated to Alaska and crossed the land bridge to Siberia, you idiots. Maybe there was a little bit of both. Maybe. The Inuit and Eskimos of the North do seem to be more closely related to Siberians than to the Navajo, the Hopi, etc. And the Native Americans of the East Coast, many of them actually their DNA tests as European. But of course, oh no, nobody came here before Columbus. Okay, maybe a few Vikings, but they didn't stay long and then they left. Yeah, and that's why the Kensington runestone is so controversial. How dare they suggest that Vikings actually traveled all the way to Minnesota? No, they just landed on the coast of Newfoundland or Nova Scotia and stayed a couple of months and then left. Right, you betcha. They just don't want to do the work involved in researching the true story because they would have to change all the textbooks and all the tenured full professors who make tons of money on their textbooks wouldn't be able to sell their books anymore. You like the Morrisons, Charles. For mom's side of the family, there were a lot of ne'er do wells, but dad's grandpa spent more time hanging around at the Purple Onion Bar in San Francisco with Jack London than he did working for a living. His last name was Darling, Thomas Darling. But Grandma Gilmore, she was awesome. I had the good fortune of meeting her because she lived long enough for me to actually meet her. Um, wow. But her husband, well, let's see, let's put it this way: dad's father was passing for white. His father, Grandma Gilmore's husband, couldn't pass. We were never allowed to meet him because, oh, the horror in 1960 of your children finding out their great grandpa was black. Idiots. Idiots. If Grandma Gilmore loved him, he must have been worth something. We used to call her Grandma Clara. Her first name was Clara. And she was just an awesome lady. Every time Mom had a baby, now I only know this because I'm the third of four children. Every time, even when my baby sister was born when I was 9 years old, Grandma Clara came and helped with the new baby. And she had to be in her late 80s or early 90s at the time. And we all just loved Grandma Clara Gilmore. Anyway, I am winding down, and my sandwich got cold, so I have to heat it up. I'm going to do as I said, I'm going to heat the barbecue sauce and pour it over the cold pulled pork. Beautiful name, Clara. Yes. I think she was made it to close to 100. Oh, the Clares, yes. Ah, anyway, in some parts of this country, like New Orleans, I'm a fair skinned black and proud of it. In other parts of the country, people who know Native Americans think I'm a full blooded Cherokee or some tribe or other. No, I'm teeny tiny bits of these. Teeny tiny. Um, great grandpa who was black, his mother was Cherokee and his father was black. So I get all that through him, both Cherokee and African. Amazing. So, time to hit the road and bring up Dr. Farrell. All of you need to go to Giza Death Star and listen to his weekly rant. We're all nuts, yes. Well, you know what they say purebred dogs and thoroughbred horses are the most unhealthy creatures. You're always better off with a mutt or what they call a grade horse. There's a reason why all those racehorses keep breaking their legs, and it isn't the track, might not even be the trainer. It's the fact that the breeders are breeding them to go fast and not to have strong legs. Okay, Charles, not my thing. Don't care for muscles and can't handle anything hotter than a medium salsa. But enjoy your mussels with Mexican sauce and black pepper. I could go for some guacamole right now, but avocados are too expensive. They want $2 each. No thanks. Anyway, let's get going and pop on over to listen to Dr. Farrell, Giza Death Star. And I'll be back when I'm able. Have a great evening.